There is a particular kind of quiet that doesn't belong to silence, but to attention. A quiet you can feel in the presence of someone who seems to be listening to more than the world around them. Picture a person sitting alone in a cafe, a soft hum of conversations filling the room, yet their gaze drifts toward the window as if they're watching something no one else can see. On the surface, they appear still, almost absent, but inside their mind an entire universe is unfolding. Every movement, every fragment of light, every passing thought becomes a thread that leads somewhere deeper. If you've ever been that person, you know this inner world can feel both expansive and isolating. You sense details others overlook. You ask questions that don't quite fit into everyday conversations. And sometimes, despite being surrounded by people, you feel slightly out of rhythm, as though your mind is operating on a different timescale. That experience isn't a flaw or a sign of detachment. It's the signature of a mind built for reflection. This video explores that experience with care. We'll step into the psychology of deep thinkers, those who live at the intersection of sensitivity and intellect, those who navigate life with an inner dialogue that never fully quiets. We'll look at why they often feel different, why their silence is misunderstood, and how depth can become both a burden and a source of strength. To understand them is to understand the tension between the visible world and the invisible one they carry within. And once you step into that world, you begin to see just how much meaning lives beneath the surface of a seemingly ordinary life. Deep thinkers often move through the world in a way that feels almost invisible, yet their interior life is anything but small. At their core is a mind that refuses to settle for surface explanations. They instinctively search for underlying patterns, hidden motives, and the deeper architecture of experience. While others register an event and move on, a deep thinker lingers, turning it over, examining its angles, asking what it reveals about human nature and about themselves. Psychology describes this as a high level of introspective tendency, a trait linked to a more active default mode network, the brain system responsible for self-reflection, imagination, and internal narrative. But definitions alone can't capture the texture of this inner world. Imagine someone hearing a simple remark from a friend. Most people respond at face value. A deep thinker hears not only the words but the tone beneath them, the emotion shaping them, and the tension or tenderness that might not be spoken aloud. One brief sentence becomes an entry point into a layered analysis of intention, history, and meaning. This way of processing life gives deep thinkers a remarkable ability to connect ideas that seem unrelated. A glance might remind them of a memory, which leads them to a philosophical question, which loops back to a personal insight. Their thoughts branch like roots beneath the soil, invisible but intricate, each path feeding into the next. And yet, none of this is performed for show. Their quietness isn't a mask or a retreat. It's the space required for a mind that works in multiple dimensions at once. They speak carefully because their thoughts unfold carefully. They pause not out of uncertainty but out of precision. To them, every idea has weight, and every word deserves consideration. Their depth is not an affectation, it is the blueprint of how they experience reality. Yet this inner richness creates a tension that deep thinkers feel almost every day. A subtle friction between the vastness of their internal world and the pace of the external one. Life around them often moves quickly, filled with rapid conversations, instinctive reactions, and decisions made in the span of a breath. But inside their mind, time stretches, thoughts loop, expand, and deepen. What takes others a moment can take them a quiet eternity. This mismatch in rhythm can make even simple interactions unexpectedly complex. Picture a group conversation where ideas bounce rapidly from person to person. A deep thinker listens, absorbs, analyzes. They consider the emotional tone, the subtext, the implications of what is being said. By the time they form a response that feels accurate and honest, the conversation has already shifted to something else. It isn't hesitation. It's the natural delay of a mind that processes in layers rather than impulses. Psychologists note that individuals with high reflective processing tend to integrate multiple sources of information simultaneously. Their brain isn't slower, it is busier. It evaluates context, intention, memory, and consequence all at once. But in a world designed around immediacy, this reflective pace can look like disengagement. People misread their quiet as distance, not understanding that deep thinkers aren't withdrawing from the moment. They're trying to honor it. The result is an inner tug-of-war. On one side is a world that values speed, certainty, and instant expression. On the other is a mind that values accuracy, nuance, and depth. Living between these two worlds can feel like speaking two dialects of the same language, never fully belonging to either. And yet, this tension is also what shapes their unique form of wisdom, a kind of understanding that comes not from reacting, but from truly seeing. This difference in rhythm often gives rise to a series of misunderstandings that follow deep thinkers throughout their lives. People who move quickly tend to assume that those who move slowly must be uninterested or detached. A thoughtful pause is mistaken for reluctance. A quiet moment is interpreted as withdrawal. The absence of immediate response becomes, in the eyes of others, the absence of feeling. One of the most common misconceptions is the belief that deep thinkers are aloof. Their reflective nature can make them appear distant, as if they are standing a few steps outside the present moment. But in reality, they are often more engaged than anyone else in the room. They are listening not only to words but to the emotional landscape beneath them. They are absorbing information at a depth most people never consider. What looks like detachment is often profound attention. Another misunderstanding arises from their limited social output. Because they choose their words carefully and speak intentionally, people assume they are hard to connect with. Yet, deep thinkers value connection intensely. They simply prefer authenticity over noise. They wait for conversations that carry substance, that make space for vulnerability, curiosity, and truth. When those conditions aren't present, they remain quiet, not because they don't care, but because they refuse to dilute meaning with empty talk. Even their analytical nature can be misread as negativity or overcomplication. In truth, the deep thinker isn't searching for problems. They are searching for understanding. They explore nuance, the way others scan headlines, naturally and continuously. These misunderstandings form a kind of veil, masking the genuine warmth, curiosity, and sensitivity deep thinkers possess. And when the world misreads them, they often retreat further inward, reinforcing the very perceptions that caused the misinterpretation in the first place. But beneath these misunderstandings lies a more difficult truth, one that many deep thinkers carry quietly. The very mind that gives them clarity, empathy, and insight can also become a source of exhaustion. When your thoughts move in widening circles instead of straight lines, even the smallest experience can expand into an intricate web of reflections. What others forget in minutes can stay with you for days, replaying in detail, reshaping itself, asking to be examined again. Psychologists refer to this pattern as rumination, a repetitive and often involuntary return to unresolved thoughts. For deep thinkers, it rarely stems from pessimism. It comes from a drive to reach resolution, to understand the full meaning of an event before letting it go. Yet the mind does not always offer closure on command. Questions linger, interpretations multiply, possibilities stack on top of one another until the weight becomes difficult to carry. This mental loop can escalate into self-doubt. A single conversation is replayed and dissected until every word feels like a potential misstep. A simple decision becomes an ethical labyrinth. Even moments of joy are sometimes followed by analysis, as if the mind is afraid of leaving anything unexplored. What begins as a search for truth slowly turns into a scarcity of peace. At its worst, this depth creates a kind of internal storm. Overthinking blurs into emotional fatigue. Sensitivity amplifies subtle signals until they feel overwhelming. The imagination that helps deep thinkers see potential also allows them to imagine loss, conflict, or disappointment long before it happens. They carry not only their own emotions but the echoes of everyone around them. And yet, this struggle remains largely invisible. Deep thinkers often appear composed, their storms hidden behind steady eyes and measured words. They know how to keep functioning even when their thoughts refuse to quiet. But inside, they may feel as if they are navigating a constant undertow, pulled between insight and overanalysis, awareness and anxiety, reflection and restlessness. This is the shadow side of depth, a mind bright enough to illuminate everything, including what hurts. Yet, the very intensity that creates these inner storms also reveals a quiet and remarkable strength, one that often goes unnoticed, even by deep thinkers themselves. Beneath their tendency to overanalyze lies a mind capable of extraordinary synthesis. They do not simply collect information, they weave it. They connect memories to concepts, emotions to ideas, and small observations to universal truths. Where others see isolated details, they see patterns that stretch across time and experience. This ability is rooted in what psychologists call depth processing, a cognitive style that encodes events with rich layers of meaning. It allows deep thinkers to notice subtleties that most overlook, to sense emotional shifts before they are spoken, and to interpret life through a lens that blends intuition with intellect. Their internal world becomes a kind of laboratory where insight is distilled from ordinary moments. Such minds are often drawn to creativity, not out of artistic ambition but because creative expression mirrors the complexity of their perception. Writing, painting, composing, or even daydreaming becomes a way to externalize thoughts too intricate to hold inside. Many great innovators and thinkers across history shared this inclination, not because they were extraordinary from birth, but because their minds naturally wandered into the spaces where ideas begin. Empathy is another quiet power deep thinkers carry. Their reflective tendencies allow them to consider multiple perspectives and to feel the emotional weight of situations that others dismiss. They can recognize contradictions within people without condemning them, understanding that complexity is part of being human. This makes them not only perceptive observers but also compassionate companions. And while their inner world can overwhelm them at times, it also gives them a depth of resilience. They can extract meaning from pain, find clarity in confusion, and see possibility within uncertainty. Their strength is not loud or forceful. It grows quietly, like roots beneath the ground, forming a foundation of insight that supports everything they do. For all their independence of thought, deep thinkers carry a fundamental need that is often overlooked. They long for connection, not the casual kind that fills silence, but the kind that reaches into the inner layers of who they are. Their depth is not meant to be a fortress. It is meant to be shared, but only with someone who can meet them at the level where their mind naturally lives. This desire for meaningful connection comes from a psychological tendency toward cognitive and emotional resonance. Deep thinkers are not satisfied with exchanges that skim the surface. They seek conversations that move with intention, that wander into the realms of hopes, fears, memories, and the unspoken currents beneath everyday life. To them, true connection is less about frequency and more about authenticity. One honest moment carries more weight than 100 empty interactions. Because of this, they often appear selective with their relationships. It is not that they judge quickly or reject easily. It is that they listen for depth, for signs that another person is willing to think, to feel, and to wonder with them. When they sense that depth in someone, their guardedness softens. They open the doors of their inner world with a sincerity that can be disarming. They offer not just conversation, but understanding, attention, and insight. But when that resonance is missing, they withdraw almost instinctively. Shallow exchanges feel draining rather than energizing. Their silence becomes a form of self-preservation, a way of protecting the parts of themselves that are too intricate to expose to indifference. In truth, deep thinkers do not need many connections. They need the right ones. A single person who truly sees them can dissolve years of quiet loneliness, reminding them that their depth is not a burden but a bridge. Yet even with this longing for resonance, deep thinkers often find themselves walking through life with a quiet sense of isolation. Their loneliness is rarely about the absence of people. It comes from the rarity of meeting someone who can truly enter the depth at which they naturally operate. Most social settings are built on speed and simplicity, and deep thinkers, with their reflective nature, often struggle to match that tempo without feeling as though they are leaving parts of themselves behind. This creates a subtle divide. They see and feel more than they can easily express, and when they attempt to share their inner world, they are sometimes met with confusion or dismissal. Over time, they learn to protect their complexity by offering only the pieces that seem easiest for others to digest. What remains unspoken becomes a private territory, expansive but solitary. Their ability to perceive multiple perspectives also plays a role in this loneliness. While others take sides, deep thinkers see nuance. They understand the reasoning behind conflicting viewpoints, which can make them feel unaligned with any particular group. They belong everywhere and nowhere at once, connected by empathy but separated by perception. And so their solitude becomes a byproduct of depth, not a rejection of connection. It is the natural result of thinking in layers in a world that often lives in outlines. Yet this solitude, while painful at times, also becomes a space where their mind can breathe, where their thoughts can stretch without constraint, and where they reconnect with the clarity that makes them who they are. Finding balance, for a deep thinker, is not about quieting the mind, but about learning how to guide it. Their thoughts will always reach farther than the moment demands, but with the right practices, that depth can become a source of clarity rather than overwhelm. The goal is not to shrink their inner world, but to create anchors that keep them grounded while allowing their thoughts to expand in healthy ways. One of the most effective tools is writing. When a mind carries many layers of reflection, thoughts can become tangled, looping endlessly without resolution. Translating them into words gives structure to what feels abstract. Psychologists describe this as externalizing cognition, a process that reduces mental load by moving thoughts from the internal world to the external one. Journaling, note-taking, or even recording voice memos can transform chaos into coherence. Once written down, problems appear more manageable, emotions feel less diffuse, and patterns become visible. Equally important is the practice of grounding. Deep thinkers often drift into introspection automatically, sometimes without noticing that they have left the present moment. Techniques such as sensory awareness, slow breathing, or focusing attention on a single physical detail help reconnect the mind to the body. Grounding does not suppress deep thought. It simply provides a stable point of return, a reminder that contemplation and presence can coexist. Creativity offers another vital outlet, because deep thinkers naturally form rich internal narratives. Artistic expression allows them to release what they cannot easily explain. Whether through art, music, writing, or even building ideas, creative work becomes a bridge between their inner world and reality. It transforms emotional complexity into something tangible, something that can be shared, understood, or simply admired for what it is. Connection also plays a crucial role in balance. Rather than chasing widespread social approval, deep thinkers thrive when they cultivate a few meaningful relationships. Seeking environments where depth is welcomed, book clubs, creative communities, philosophical discussions, creates opportunities for genuine resonance. In these spaces, their quiet wisdom is not only understood but valued. Finally, deep thinkers must learn the practice of sufficiency. Because their mind naturally searches for the most complete understanding, they can become trapped in the belief that clarity requires perfection. But understanding does not need to be absolute to be useful. Sometimes good enough is not a compromise but a form of emotional freedom. Learning to pause, to let unresolved questions rest, and to trust the process of life can restore a sense of peace. Balance is not the absence of depth. It is the harmony between thinking deeply and living fully, allowing insight to enrich experience rather than overshadow it. In the end, the journey of a deep thinker is not about quieting the mind's complexity, but about learning to live in harmony with it. Depth, when misunderstood, can feel like an obstacle, but when embraced with clarity, it becomes a form of insight that few possess. The world often rushes towards certainty, simplicity, and speed, forgetting that understanding takes time and meaning requires reflection. Deep thinkers remind us that not everything valuable happens quickly, and not everything real can be seen at a glance. Their silence is not emptiness, it is preparation. Their questions are not doubts, they are pathways. Their sensitivity is not fragility, it is attunement to the subtleties that shape human experience. And while this way of being can make them feel out of place, it also grants them a rare ability to perceive truth in its many layers. What matters most is realizing that depth is not something to hide, it is something to cultivate. The world needs people who can pause in the middle of chaos, who can listen beneath the noise, who can see the meaning inside the moments others overlook. These are the thinkers who transform confusion into clarity, who turn ordinary experiences into understanding, who carry light into the unseen corners of life. As the noise of the world rises and falls, the deep thinker stands beneath a sky that offers no explanations, only presence, and in that presence, they find what they were searching for all along. Not perfect answers, but a quiet, enduring sense of truth.